Welcome to Beyond Belief, How the American Civil Religion Divides Us in 2024. This is the fourth video in a four-part series in which I present a framework for understanding several accounts of how America can flourish that compete for influence in our public square. This framework will prepare you for a subsequent series in which I will do a deep dive into multiple disordered nationalisms we encounter from the left and the right. In the first three videos, I introduced the concept of nationalism from a particularly Christian ethics perspective, and I developed our understanding of both disordered and rightly ordered nationalisms. Now that you're equipped to critically evaluate the peoplehood stories we hear in the public square, we'll pivot to the particular case of the American civil religion. It's supposed to unite us. Why does it divide us in 2024? My hope is that we will all be inspired to stand firm on higher ground as we encounter disordered peoplehood stories in the public square. Let's get started. Now that we've talked about healthy and disordered nationalisms, let's talk about the American civil religion. Why? Well, it's the primary form of nationalism that we teach our children in schools, and it's the means through which we embed the American identity in citizens. More importantly, it is often a cause of our political divisions. And in 2024, it might just be the cause of an existential crisis for you. So let's talk about it. Since 1873, just after our Civil War, we've had a law that's required that all coinage and the dollar bill have printed on it E pluribus unum, our national motto. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. It names our aspiration to become a people who are united by certain values, certain commitments that distinguish us. Ideas and leaders who divide us work against that aspiration. E pluribus unum, it's our national motto for a reason. If you comprehend that aspiration, then you can comprehend the American civil religion. It's that story we share as we strive to construct an American identity that always aims at neighborly unity, that is nourished and not obstructed by our diversity. That peoplehood story, or nationalism, is our way of conveying those transcendent values that matter most in that aspiration. Now, I call it a story, but it's actually a set of practices, like saying the Pledge of Allegiance, singing the Star-Spangled Banner, preserving monuments and memorials in our midst, celebrating the birthdays of heroes, and performing rituals around certain holidays like the 4th of July and Thanksgiving. Those are all ways that we convey those most important values that make us a people. Our civil religion lifts up great heroes like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and Martin Luther King. And it draws upon a civic canon, an American Bible, if you will, that includes some of our greatest identity-shaping documents, like the Declaration of Independence, our Bill of Rights, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and Martin Luther King's I Got a Dream speech. We hope every child, every citizen is shaped by the words those heroes spoke to us. Our civil religion fuels a shared American dream, our becoming a free American people who govern ourselves for the common good. That common good ethic includes our shared commitment to protect from arbitrary and dominative power all of those whose political and economic insecurity is captured so beautifully by that biblical metaphor of the widow, the orphan, and the resident alien. It calls us to become a people who embody that belief that all humans are equal in our essential human dignity. It teaches that all Americans are called to sacrifice so that our neighbors may flourish. Our American civil religion calls us to the humility and realism that anticipates human frailty and sinfulness. For that reason, it teaches us to respect our democratic institutions as essential yet insufficient guardians of our liberty and freedom, and therefore to cultivate our civic virtue as the ultimate means of ensuring the common good. So, above all, the American civil religion is about cultivating that civic virtue that must be cherished if we are ever to embody our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Unfortunately, our civil religion that is supposed to unite us too often divides us. At one level, that ought not be surprising, because all healthy and disordered nationalisms are curated at home and in our communities, and they compete in the public square. I call them peoplehood stories to highlight that they evolve as they compete and as they come into contact with alternative perspectives and as they are transformed by events and changes in the way we live. So there really is no static and singular American story that encapsulates our values and commitments. There have always been many. Some people, usually older than me, nostalgically recall a time when we were all on the same page in terms of our American identity. But that homogeneity is a romantic myth, an illusion created by segregation's walls. No, American identity has always been a work in progress, something we negotiate together in the public square. While there may have been at one time, just after World War II, a relatively common American civil religion, today we can observe two distinct strands that generate different worldviews and emphasize different values and commitments. And those two strands now compete in the public square for influence. Political scientists call these the priestly and prophetic strands of the American civil religion. The priestly strand defends our status quo. It defends our deeds and our existing structures. And most often, it defends them using the theme of American exceptionalism. The prophetic strand contrasts those same deeds and existing structures with our ideals, our values, and our commitments, and it calls us to reform. To get a feel for how these different strands of our civil religion play out, consider how they generate different responses to these fairly routine questions. Should children recite their Pledge of Allegiance in school? Should "In God We Trust" remain on our dollar bill? True or false? Burning the American flag is wrong because it's our sacred symbol. Freedom must be for everyone if we're to call ourselves the land of the free. True or false? We must make amends for America's original sins. Now, there are two important takeaways in this survey of the American civil religion. The first is that we agree on more than we disagree. Though the two strands diverge in the responses that they generate for questions like those, they agree more than they disagree on the values they proclaim. In particular, they agree that what binds us together is our shared commitment to be ruled by law rather than by our passions. And they agree that all citizens should be bound by the same law, no matter their skin hue, gender, national origin, or creed. And as you'll see in a future video, that distinguishes both strands of our civil religion from the American form of Christian nationalism, which, in an oxymoronic fashion, imagines a society by and for a particular segment of our population, in particular the Anglo-Protestant segment. And it's important to remember that both strands of the American civil religion vastly outnumber those who advocate Christian nationalism. The second takeaway is that the two strands of our civil religion can divide us more than they unite us. That's because our major political parties have tried to co-opt our civil religion for their benefit. That's raised the existential stakes for all of us. The priestly strand is entrenched in the Republican Party, and the prophetic strand is entrenched in the Democratic Party. Why is that important to know? Historically, participation in faith communities has satisfied our deep human need for identity and belongingness. But as our participation in faith communities has waned, identification as a Republican or as a Democrat has displaced our faith identities. And our belongingness to a political party has displaced that belongingness that we used to receive through our participation in a faith community. Faithfulness to our political party has, for many, become the way we experience the belongingness that satisfies our existential need for an identity that's beyond ourselves. And that raises radically the stakes when a political leader insists that we embrace claims and values and commitments that are in deep conflict with those that have long ago been embedded in us as part of our American identity. It presents to us an existential crisis. In that case, what do you do? Well, to preserve that sense of belongingness, many will choose to perform extraordinary feats of mental gymnastics in order to rationalize outrageous claims and behaviors. They choose belongingness over their honor and their dignity. They choose willful ignorance over truth. But once you debase yourself that way, it's very hard to return to the higher ground. It takes extraordinary courage to risk that sense of belongingness in order to stand up for truth and America's highest values. But, brothers and sisters, as our American civil religion tells us, that's exactly what American heroes do. If that describes you, I pray that you'll choose to be an ordinary American hero and return to the higher ground that is your true home. And so that's the American civil religion. As I said, most Americans, whether Democrat, Republican, or Independent, fit within the boundaries of one of those two strands. With that foundation firmly in place, we'll now pivot. In the next video, we'll begin to dig deeply into Christian nationalism and strive to understand why it presents a clear and present danger to the society that we aim to construct. Until then, Godspeed.